Thank you for joining another episode of SaaSy Digital Transformation today. I'm Andrea. I run SaaSy. We help companies buy, build, or integrate software. We are doing a series of these short interviews talking about digital transformation, but that's normally quite a broad term. And for us in particular, that means a business is using digital tools and technologies to streamline and improve its operations, create new products and services, or better meet the needs of its customers. In its simplest terms, that means putting in and using the right software. And with me today, I've got Paul. Do you want to please introduce your lovely self?
Sure. So I'm Paul Herndon. I am Managing Director of Fuelius. Been with Fuelius now for 8-9 years, and a big sort of advocate of digital transformation in general, really.
What's one thing everyone should know about you but probably doesn't?
I'm quite a vocal person, so they probably do know it about me already. One thing everybody knows about me that probably doesn't. I mean, everybody knows I'm a Manchester United fan. Everybody knows.
You do a great Conor McGregor impression.
I do a very good Conor McGregor impression, but not. It's too early on a Monday morning for that, and it's only coffee in my mug. So
I was going to use
maybe
that
maybe in the future.
Fair enough. Maybe for next time then. What's your favorite app or tool and why?
Right. Okay. So I am somebody that doesn't settle down with an app. I must have tried every to-do list app. I must have tried every, and I'm constantly looking for new things. However, probably 6 to 8 months ago, I stumbled across, probably about a year ago, I stumbled across Notion. And I did what I usually do with any new software product, where I sort of half-arsed it for a little bit and didn't really used it as a glorified note taker. And then I ended up paying 99 quid or something for some second brain template with it. And it's unreal. Like, it literally runs me now in terms of business life, personal life, to-do list, long-term planning, sort of everything. So, there's an iOS version, a Mac version, a web browser version. And I would struggle without it now. My only annoyance with it is I didn't realize that, until I was on a plane last week, I didn't realize that it doesn't store or cache anything offline. So I get on a plane, I'm in the air, I'm one of those people that needs to be doing something digital, and I've got no signal because I'm obviously in the air. And I'm like, oh, Notion, I can sort all my to-dos. No, I couldn't. So bit of a gripe, but absolute favorite tool at the moment.
I did exactly the same thing. I went and opened my to-do list on there, and I did exactly the same as you did in terms of how I stumbled across it and used it as my glorified notes and to-dos. And I was frustrated for the same reason. I'm like, no, but it's just my to-do list. Why can't I just done on the plane? Yeah. I've written down your the template because that sounds fun for me to go and look through.
I'll send you a link to it afterwards. It's full on. It took me, I think it's an hour and a half's worth of video tutorials just to learn how to use it. But it's brilliant.
Fair enough.
And we've used Notion a lot internally as well for this room we have here is a sort of podcast studio, we call it. We do a lot of filming in here and stuff, and we're in the middle of launching our own podcast, and we do a lot of video production in here. But for the podcast we're launching, you can pretty much just Google podcast Notion you can anything you're looking to do plus Notion template at the end, and you get somebody's perfectly planned out workflow with data, with database structure for storing guests and forms for collecting bios and stuff like that. So it's a really strong tool. I think my only other gripe with it is I see a lot of people trying to use it as sort of an external customer facing project management tool, and whilst I think they're running the risk of trying to become all things to all people. And it at that point, I think it reaches a limit, and it probably should stop there and just be used for what it's good at.
Curiosity follow-up question, because at the beginning you said that you are a bit of a tart when it comes to apps.
Yeah.
So why do you switch around? Like, what's the motivator for trying different ones?
I think I in my life I've struggled with sort of focus on individual tasks, and I find that I can have a load of different ideas and I can sort of do a bit of that task, do a bit of this task, do a bit of this task. And then what ends up happening is I end up with a deadline that's gone shorter, and I work really well once I have that short deadline because it needs doing and there's an absolute time pressure, and therefore I have that singular focus on one thing. And I think it's probably, there's been times, and I've sort of got some other things I've done recently to change this habit, but there's been times where I've got a massive to-do list and I spend the first hour procrastinating, trying to find a better to-do list to somehow solve my to-do list. And it's like, just it doesn't matter what the to-do list is, just get things done and your to-do list will disappear. I'm a very tech curious person anyway. Like when I was 13, probably younger actually, 12, I'm 34 now, so 22 years ago, I really wanted a PC for Christmas, but I didn't really come from a household that could afford that. And also back then computers were 10x what they are now probably. But my mum's best friend was a lady called Sean who was in the fire brigade, and on the side sort of learned to build computers basically, and she used to sort of built her own computer, and I really wanted one. So my mum and my dad basically over time every month would buy another part, because it was the way of them being able to afford it basically. And it must have took sort of 12 to 18 months to get there, but then I had a computer for Christmas, and then I really got into sort of just tech in general. Then, I was one of those people that would, I don't know, let's say I'd finished with a CD player I didn't want anymore. I'd smash it open and pull things off it and pull the little resistors off and try and learn what they are and stuff. And I'm quite curious when it comes to tech. And I think the same thing is there with apps and software and so on. But just quickly on the focus I mentioned, one of the things I read up on about 18 months ago was the Pomodoro technique.
Oh, yeah.
I use this religiously now. So for anyone who doesn't know, Pomodoro is a tomato effectively, and there's a Pomodoro timer. And effectively what it is, you start a Pomodoro timer and you have 20 minutes of solid focus on one single task. And then after that 20 minutes, you have a 5-minute break. So every 20 minutes, you have a 5-minute break. And it's not a 5-minute break as in, great, I can stop work now. It's just 20 minutes of dedicated focus on one thing, 5 minutes away from that thing. So that might be checking emails, checking Slacks. It might be grabbing a coffee or something like that. And then you go again. I think the timer does this for me, so I can't remember the times, but I think every 3 20-minute intervals, you then have a slightly longer break of 15 minutes. So it's been great for me. And, since I've adopted that, I've stuck with Notion, and I'm not in the market for a new to-do list tool at the moment.
I laughed earlier just because it's so familiar. Like I procrastinate and want to find something else, and I'm like, oh, I'll just look at another app that will help my to-do list start fast zone or something. So it's quite familiar. We've explained what digital transformation means for what we do. What does it mean for you, plural?
Yeah, so I think we class ourselves as a digital transformation agency, and I think, for me, digital transformation is where we are literally, I'm going to use the word transforming again, but elaborate, we're transforming someone's digital estate, usually through typically a new website, but that's not digital transformation. What makes it digital transformation is, integration into third-party systems that may not have existed before, new functionality that sort of enhances customer outcomes and enhances customer experience. Perhaps we're creating self-service elements where, bringing payments in for the first time or something. And ultimately, I think the outcome of a digital transformation project isn't, if we're talking about it from a web capacity, it isn't, we've got a new website, it looks nice. It's, we now have a new website that does all these great new things that improves customer experience, improves customer outcomes, increases internal efficiency, decreases internal time taken to do manual tasks that are now automated through digital. So often, not always, but a digital transformation project for us often removes unnecessary sort of administration internally once complete.
Nice. Examples, please, or an example.
So I'll give a broad example than a specific example. So the broad example, we have a sister company, Prodo, that just works in the social housing space, and what they do in the social housing space typically is they create self-service portals that allows tenants to log in, report a repair, get an update on the status of that repair, cancel appointments, reschedule appointments, make payments, set up direct debit arrangement, download bills, all of the typical things that you would imagine are quite normal, but don't really exist a lot of the time. And to power that is obviously a lot of external systems. So reporting a repair isn't just fill in a form and tell us what's wrong. It's, we know your address, therefore we know what's in your property. Tell us the part, we know tell us the problem. From that, we know the parts that exist and we know where they are. We know what van they're on. We know who's available. We know which calendar slots we've got and so on. Now, the reason that I mentioned that is because PwC did a lot of work in that space probably about 8-9 years ago, where they ascertained that every single time a tenant goes to a social housing office face-to-face and transacts with the social housing provider, it costs them roughly £18 to sort of administer, resource, deal with, handle the issue. If they bring that over the phone, it goes to about £12. If they do it online, it goes to about 7p. So actually what we saw was, when you've got 25,000 homes and you're spending £18 for a big proportion of your transactions, £12 for probably for all the rest of your transactions, and you've got 0% channel shift, as they call it, in that space. You've got 0% of your sort of issues are coming through digital. You're paying sort of 10, 12, £18 per issue when you could be paying 8p. So they all sort of light bulb moment, and that's not a pun with the light bulbs behind me, but light bulb moment that they can literally sort of decrease the costs by 100x by bringing things online and bringing things digital. So that's more of a sort of broad example. But back to sort of Fuelius, our agency, we've literally just finished and gone live last week on a sort of 6 to 8 month project with our local train network. So they look after, they are the train provider for Merseyside, Liverpool, Chester, Wirral, and they do thousands, and they literally move thousands and thousands of passengers a day across those areas. And it's sort of very well-known train network in our local area. And for them, the goal was effectively to A, build a new website, but B, to sort of improve customer experience and improve customer outcomes.
And you've mentioned 2 of the positive outcomes just there at the end. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that? Internally, externally, because what I always get quite a lot of enjoyment from, or professional, I've lost my train, is, yes, it's all about digital transformation and the often quite cool things that we put in place, but it's the impact on human beings that do those jobs or need those services or whatever it is that's the really kind of important bit that isn't as shiny to look at, I suppose.
Because I think in this day and age, when I first started here nearly 10 years ago, if you wanted a new website, it was, we want a website because it needs to be responsive. That was a new thing back then. Now that's obviously a bit of a, of course, we'd be crazy if we didn't do that. For me, digital transformation projects aren't about how things look and feel anymore. It is important, but it's almost a secondary consideration. I think in terms of some of the positive outcomes there, if we elaborate on them a little bit further, this train network is going through a large digital transformation as an organization anyway. And I think that's also important. We often find that when an organization is going through digital transformation, we are 5% of that journey, 10% of that journey. If you go up and up and up, you're finding new ERP systems, you're finding new CRMs, you're finding total new ways of working internally and new sort of third-party providers that might ultimately be a year of that project or 2 years of that project before website is sort of part of that journey. But in terms of so they're going through that journey. And in terms of some positive outcomes there, I'd say we're on phase one currently, so there's a lot more transformation to happen internally, which is currently happening, to do with infrastructure and ticketing and various other things that will then have to make its way through to web, and various functions and pieces will be created accordingly. But in terms of sort of initial positive outcomes, our goal really was around enhancing commuters' experience when it comes to traveling on trains. So obviously one thing we can't do is change the trains. I mean, funnily enough, they've just spent tens and tens of millions, and the new trains launch very soon. But what we can do is we can control when people are looking for train times, when people are looking for train prices, when people are looking to work out how do I go from, if we use Eurovision as an example, because it was obviously in Liverpool, if we look at people new to the area coming for 3 to 4 days, how do I get to Liverpool? Once I'm in Liverpool and I arrive at Liverpool Lime Street, how do I get from Liverpool Lime Street to the M&S Bank Arena? Once I've done that and I've got a few days spare prior to Eurovision, if I want to go and see Royal Birkdale Golf Course in Southport, or I want to go and see the beaches in the Wirral, or I want to come and see the walls of Chester, ultimately we're probably talking about a 60, 70 mile area. How do I do that? And is that possible? So we built sort of journey planners and itinerary planners and stuff like that allow the user to sort of go through that process, which ultimately tries to increase usage of the trains. And then other little things, tiny functions, such as, if you go onto the website every morning because you're a commuter, and this is typically more important in winter months when we have disruption from rain and snow and ice and so on, why, when you're looking to check your journey from Chester to Liverpool, why do we ask you your home destination every single time? So such a tiny feature, let's just cookie them and say home destination Chester, or whatever it might be, so that we've just taken a step out of that process each time. So I would say phase one is a lot about UX and UI, a couple of elements of transformation, but future phases are around the ticketing process and so on, and further increasing how we increase utilization of the trains.
Any integrations outside of those systems that are either already happened or planned?
Yeah, so quite a few. So live integrations with the likes of Network Rail, so that if there is disruption, within minutes we're updating the website accordingly, and we're using some sort of more. The last website is about 10 years old, so the UX has obviously evolved dramatically, but we're using UX in a way that, if that is the case, how do we, red banner alerts to tell people there's disruption? How do we make it very front of mind and very front of website effectively? How do we make it very clear there's disruption? That gives us a live feed into the whole of Network Rail effectively. Now, we don't need every piece of Network Rail information. We just need this local area. But should there be some more, let's say, abrupt transformation, an accident on a line or something like that, within minutes the website's updated. Within 2 or 3 minutes, ultimately the website's updated and people know there's disruption. It allows us to try to stop people making their journey and try to therefore increase customer satisfaction.
Okay. If just thinking about, one of your typical customers, any advice for other people in that position, or other teams or leaders of teams in that position, about to embark on their own digital roller coaster? Because it is a roller coaster.
Definitely. I would say something we always like to try and do, and it, I would say, occasionally gets met with resistance, is we like to try and do some consultancy up front before we started the project. And people don't love that, because ultimately we're asking them for some money. We're asking them to commission a piece of work that could be 10, 15, 20 grand or something, to ultimately go into an organization, scope systems, understand current systems, work with them in regards to speaking to new potential suppliers, maybe even speak to customers, build personas, work out, various pain points of customers, and ultimately turn that into something that isn't a specification, isn't like a tech spec at this point or a functional spec, but something that completely outlines exactly what is to be built and how and why and what systems. And a lot of people resist that because they feel like ultimately, I'm just going to make this figure up. I'm spending £100,000 on a website. Why would I spend 20,000 plus 100,000 on a website? And I guess ultimately, I cannot think of a situation where that consultancy hasn't ended up saving the customer money or hasn't ended up stopping scope creep and therefore stopping us ask for more budget and so on. So the way I see it, it's almost like a little bit of an insurance policy to the sort of future budget requirements of your website. And I think people, in my opinion, people tend to involve the web agency, the digital agency later than they should. And I think if we could sit at that table 6 months earlier, whilst you're having the conversations 6 months earlier around which system to procure and why to procure it, because what ends up happening is company says we're choosing this system for our CRM, and we're choosing this system for our CRM because it does this great with sales pipelines, it does this in a really good way with deal forecasting, and it does X, Y, and Z. That's great, and our team like the look of it. And then you start the process and there's no API. Or there is an API, but it's really poor. Yeah. Or the API documentation shows us that we can only do 3 of the 5 things you want to do. And then we're coming to you to say, we need to build a piece of middleware to do all the rest in the middle. And that's going to be 40, 50 grand because it's a colossal piece of work. So I think ultimately my advice there would be, yes, it might be a 1 to 2 year journey internally, but don't involve the web agency on sort of month 18 of that process and expect them to get it right first time. I think, involve them early, and if you can, pay for some upfront work and some upfront consultancy.
Yeah, just to echo that is, I found this not just with the likes of what you do, what I do, but other suppliers that don't cross over into my world that much at all. But you involve the right people early enough in the sort of the strategy or even the requirements gathering bit. And it, like the whole point of bringing someone in as a either best in class of what they do or an expert in what they offer is to offer more advice and more support and a lot more knowledge, and help them ask questions like, so you might have been given a requirements document, right, that says, oh, it must do X, Y, and Z. But there's no mention on there of APIs, for example, right? Well, the right person earlier in the conversation would have known to help them ask that. Do you need APIs on that? Do you need to be talking about integrations with other, think further down the line, kind of thing? That's definitely where a lot of the value is added.
Definitely. And we also, as I say, we like to speak to our customers throughout that process where we can. And again, that often gets met with a bit of resistance because A, it's more time and therefore more budget, but B, we might hear things we don't want to hear. Or we might uncover things we don't want to uncover. But when we have customers that are happy to go to that approach, it allows us to sort of ask customers or sort of pose the question as to, this particular brand is suggesting you desperately want this functionality. Do you? No. Okay. Well, let's understand why that functionality is important, or not even just functionality, like, navigation on a website, for example. We put a lot of time into information architecture. And the reason we do that is because if you get 6 or 7 senior people in a room, they all want their business function to be the most prominent position on the navigation. They all want something to do with themselves or their business function to be quite prominent. And we tend to call, we have a term, and we use this with customers, and they typically laugh, even the person we're talking about. We tend to call sort of CEOs the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion. And what tends to happen when we do digital projects without customers is the hippo, the person who's highest paid and therefore probably their opinion gets listened to the most, tends to get things their way, and it's the way they want it, as opposed to us saying, look, I know you're saying that you want this picture of the 4 C-suite executives on the homepage in the banner because you've won an award, but does your customer want that? 98% of your visitors are customers, and of those 98%, 60% is this persona who's looking for this type of information. Why are we hiding it? And I think once we go down that approach and we overlay that with data and analytics and sort of content auditing and so on, we've seen sort of hippos completely sort of go back into their shells and say, you know what, you're completely right. Customers first. We agree.
Yeah. There's a lot about the UX and the user
Yeah.
experience that's just, it might be common sense or plain as day to us working in the industry, and that's like what we do day in, day out. We keep up to date with the changes and stuff like that, but evidencing that to people who have a particular opinion or belief is a lot harder, isn't it, to get them
definitely
to do the right thing for themselves. Last one, nice gentle one to finish off with. What's your hack or pro tip that you wish you'd known 3 years ago?
This is such a tiny one. I wouldn't even call it. There's a few people I've told, and when I've told them, they've loved it, but it's so tiny, it's unreal. If you use sort of the Google suite, so it doesn't really apply to Office 365, but if you're using Google Workspace or whatever they rebrand so often, in your browser, so I'm looking at mine now, instead of going slides.google.com, pressing new and so on, if you type slides.new or docs.new or sheets.new and just hit enter, it just opens a brand new document for you there and then.
I didn't know that.
As long as you're using Chrome.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
So it's not a huge hack, but I create a fair few documents, so it just saves me a few seconds each time.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm normally in the wrong bit of Google Docs in the first place, and then
I'm the same. I go to Docs to create a slide, and then I've realised I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for chatting to us today.
That's cool. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.